more times than not, the candidates that my leaders are really after are not in these applicant pools. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Those people already have great jobs and they aren't looking. If we don't actively look for the best people and count on whoever's available, we don't get placements and we don't have a business, right? So hiring leaders need someone who can deliver the passive talent market and someone who can recognize those red flags of shady consultants in order to weed out who can help versus, who's going to hurt them.
Welcome back to Between Fires and Futures. I'm your host, Tonya Derail, and today we're talking about something every IT leader knows in their bones. You can have the right strategy, you can have executive buy-in, you can even have the budget and still the project stalls. Not because the initiative was wrong, but because the talent decisions underneath just didn't hold. And what's hard is most IT leaders aren't just dealing with a capacity problem, they're dealing with a trust problem because in a market full of resumes, certifications, and people who look incredible on paper, you don't find out who can really deliver until you're already deep into the project. And then there's the second issue no one talks about enough, and that's commitment. Even when someone is highly qualified, will they stay engaged long enough to actually get you across the finish line? Or will they disappear the minute the next shiny opportunity shows up? So that's what this episode is about. The hidden reasons IT initiatives slow down, drift, or quietly derail, and how leaders can protect delivery by getting the right expertise at the right time with the right level of certainty. My guest today is Clayton Dinger. Clay has spent the last 8 years working in the enterprise IT staffing market, sourcing niche, high demand technology talent and partnering with IT leaders to bridge complex delivery gaps. He operates in the world most IT leaders only meet when timelines are collapsing, where quality matters, speed matters, and the wrong hire doesn't just waste time, it creates real risk. So today we're going to talk to Clayton about what he sees behind the scenes, how leaders get exposed, the red flags that signal someone's not going to deliver. The difference between muscling through and actually stabilizing a project, and the moment you stop stretching your team thinner and bring in outside expertise before the cost gets expensive. So if you're running lean right now, if you've got critical initiatives on the calendar this year, or if you've ever found yourself thinking we should be further along than this, then this episode's for you. Clayton, welcome to the show.
Tonya, thank you so much for inviting me to this discussion today. I mean, I know we've been planning this for some time, and I've already, introduced you at a high level to a lot of the challenges that I find myself helping IT leaders navigate. But it's just so great to finally sit down and get the opportunity to get into the weeds on all of that. Staffing and recruiting is just, it's something I'm so passionate about. Right. And, just to kind of preface this discussion, I was hoping, I know we do have some important topics to cover here, but I wanted to just share a little bit of background, on how I got into staffing and recruiting, and what's kept me around all these years. So I hope that's all right.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. So, I mean, for the last 8 years, I have really lived and breathed staffing recruiting. And even though it feels like by now I should have experienced all this industry has to offer, I find myself learning new things every day. New things about technology, new things about industry trends, and new things about people. And in that vein, I would probably say it's pretty simple. The main reason why I love being in this line of work, it's people helping people, right? I've always really had a proclivity towards sales, just because, sales roles are the most socially centric roles you can have, regardless of what industry you're in. And I'm sure you've realized by now that I'm not one to shy away from a conversation. But the beauty to me about staffing is that it takes the social aspect of sales a step further, because I get to connect people who have business challenges to people who can help them deliver business solutions. And facilitating those relationships, for me anyways, is very rewarding. And it's how I built a trusted network of clients and candidates, and it's all really predicated on that underlying principle of people helping people. So with that said, I mean, I'm ready to get right into this and chat about some of the most dynamic challenges that I'm seeing today across my client base, all the IT leaders that I work with, what they, have issues with in meeting their deliverables, and why, to me, having the right supporting cast of talent is just as important as having the right technology solutions. When
Yeah,
you're,
yeah,
yeah,
definitely. And we hear it all the time, right? So, yeah, let's get into it. I love that you set it up that way because it is people helping people and the
it sure
pains that we
is.
hear. And I want to talk about the pains first because that's where every IT leader lives right now. They're understaffed, they're overloaded, they're still expected to deliver. The
Hmm.
pressure is on. And every IT leader knows what it feels like to run a critical initiative while they're understaffed. So, what would you say are the real unspoken pressure points you see IT leaders carrying right now?
I mean, this list of challenges that hiring leaders face is long and it's really unique to the individual. But if I had to narrow it down to just a couple like broader umbrella points, I would have to say there's really two main pressure points that I'm seeing across the board today. And the first one is transparency. And what does that mean, transparency? So it's just honestly, it's getting more and more difficult to navigate talent markets and flesh out imposters. Who, who can
Yeah.
really make themselves look good on paper, but in reality, they can't deliver. And the leaders that I work with, why this is a challenge for them, is really because they just don't have the bandwidth to sort through a black hole of applicants from LinkedIn job postings, full of people who might just be propping up their qualifications in order to get to the interview stage with, I never really understand why they do this, if they're just trying to, pull the wool over everyone's eyes.
Right. They're going to get
Um,
found out at some stage, but people
yeah,
do it.
exactly. People do it. It's right. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
But they usually don't make it very long. But here's the other thing, right? Salaried HR partners who just post jobs and pray that the right person falls into their lap, run that process because they just aren't incentivized the same way that agency recruiters are. We actively seek out the best people for the role, because more times than not, the candidates that my leaders are really after are not in these applicant pools. Uh, and the reason for that is pretty simple. Those people already have great jobs and they aren't looking. And if we don't actively look for the best people and count on whoever's available, we don't get placements and we don't have a business, right? So hiring leaders need to deliver the passive talent, need someone who can deliver the passive talent market and someone who can recognize those red flags of shady consultants in order to weed out who can help versus who's going to hurt them, right?
Yeah.
And this is why having a trusted network of candidates like I do is so critical to recruiter success, and why for hiring leaders, having a trusted staffing partner is such an important and valuable partnership. And so transparency is something that's plaguing everyone, and it's not something that you can really address on your own. And that's, again, right, comes down to why the partnership is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
And another really important one is loyalty. And
Mhm.
that's another big challenge. And it's simply just because there's so much competition today. There's so much competition for good talent in today's markets. Everybody wants the best niche talent. And to be honest, the smaller the candidate pool of those people are, the more valuable the candidates are to the organizations. And the candidates know this. Everybody knows their value to the market, right? So
Yeah.
really, when it comes down to loyalty, securing people for longer than, until the next shiny opportunity comes across their desk, it takes a lot more than just a commitment on paper, a signed agreement, right?
Hmm.
Hiring leaders really need to take things a step further in the evaluation process, and that's where we come in, right?
Hmm.
They need a trusted staffing partner with recruiters who can accurately gauge engagement, who can accurately engage commitment levels from the candidates they connect with. And again, all comes down to that trusted network of candidates, effective screening processes, engaging the right candidates, asking the right questions, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Great information. So transparency and loyalty. Um,
Absolutely.
from a transparency standpoint, what would you say are the biggest red flags that tell you someone looks great on paper, but they're not going to deliver in real life? Are there any? Can you spot them?
No LinkedIn profile. That is a huge one. That's
Mhm.
something that we almost always use as the basis for evaluating whether or not someone's a legitimate candidate, right? I mean,
Mhm.
in most people today, if they're especially if they're in this, candidate network,
Mhm.
they're going to have a LinkedIn profile. It's the
Yeah,
it's the key to their, to them
right.
being able to get a job in the first place. So that's a big one.
Good. And then what about the loyalty piece? Because that's real. Like, how do you gauge whether someone's going to stay committed long enough to actually get you across the finish line?
I mean, the thing is, we can only really control, a candidate's actions. So like we can't really control them at all, right? We can only trust that we've done a good enough job at evaluating the level of engagement that they have, and also a big part of it is just figuring out their motivation for leaving their current role,
Mhm.
and even more important to that, their motivation for joining a new team. Like, why are
Mhm.
you so excited to join this team? What do you think you can do to make meaningful contributions? And, you know, if you ask questions like these enough, I feel like, you can really start to flesh out who's invested versus who isn't,
Yeah.
because, the truth comes out in people's answers when you talk to them long enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love those questions too.
Yeah.
So, we spoke at length about this, but IT leaders, God, especially now in the age of AI where everything's accelerating, they've got impossible mandates right now,
Hmm.
right? Transform
Absolutely.
the business, adopt new tech, go figure out AI, ship faster, keep the lights on. Um, so, and they have fewer resources. They're running leaner and expected to do so much more. So, where are they most vulnerable right now when it comes to skills, capacity, bandwidth?
I mean, IT leaders, they have to be thorough when they select the team members that are going to be responsible for helping them meet their deliverables, right? But like I mentioned earlier, oftentimes they don't have the bandwidth to do the grunt work early on,
Yeah,
right? So I think the key to really minimizing time spent on evaluating candidates so you can get the right people in sooner, that is all centered around managing quality control from the inception point, right?
yeah,
And that involves having detailed discussions right out of the gate. Um, and these discussions are between the leadership and the recruiters that they've engaged, to go to market to find these people, right? You have to clarify expectations around a couple of different aspects. And it can't just be the what's, right?
hmm,
The required technical skills and capabilities expected of these resources. You also have to be able to qualify the whys and the hows of getting to that end delivery goal. And I'd say these are just as important as the technology, as the technical skills. And
hmm,
what I really mean by the whys and the hows, this is all project context, right?
right,
So what we like to do in those initial discussions is fleshing out the in-depth project details and the roadmaps, the team structure, the dynamics, the various types of stakeholder groups involved along the way. I mean, these are all critical factors in terms of finding someone who can be successful on your team. And for that reason, it's really important to identify candidates who, yes, they can perform the technical aspects of the role, but they
mhm,
also have the necessary delivery context that makes sense for your specific project, right? You want
right,
people to come on board who can leverage experience from a similar project that they were in success that they completed successfully elsewhere. Someone that can help you or help lead your team down the path of least resistance. They know the pitfalls along the way. They know, the shortest distance between 2 points, right?
mhm,
But you also have to have the right cultural fit, the right team
mhm,
fit. That's important as well. And, candidates who have worked in similar environments in similar structures, team structures before, you know, past success is always an indicator of future success, right?
right,
So finding a lot of those synergies and just finding those people that have kind of been there and done that in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those scenarios is really important.
Yeah.
And so, with that in mind, working with familiar recruiters is so important here, because the folks who understand, and these recruiters, I mean by the folks that understand the nuanced details of these hiring leaders' expectations, is really what makes all the difference, right? At the end of the day, staffing is a lot more than just providing people whose resumes check the boxes on your job description,
Right.
right? It's about providing people who are willing and able to make meaningful contributions to your specific project.
Yeah.
And really, the whys and the hows, these aren't searchable qualities like the whats are. The whats are technical
Right.
skills that a lot of people are going to list on their resume, but those contextual things are a lot more difficult to search just looking at a resume. So
Right.
those discussions to understand the deeper experience they're so important, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in these critical projects. And I read a stat that I thought was wild. I did not notate where this came from though. Shoot. But
Okay.
I'll share
Let's
it
let
anyway because
maybe
it's
hey,
good.
maybe I've heard it. Maybe I've
Yeah,
heard it.
it was a 2025 survey of global IT leaders found that skills shortages they're delaying digital transformations and causing product development delays in 54% of organizations across the US. Like that's more than half.
Wow.
It's huge.
Yeah, that is a huge number.
Right? And it's not clearly not a motivation issue, it's a capability gap.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think once that drag shows up early, it only compounds. Like you're not solving it with the same resources or talent. So that that drag shows up early. It's just going to continue to compound and become frustrating and impact
Absolutely.
delivery.
At some point you need to know where to cut your losses, right? And
Yeah,
the way to not have to cut your losses in the first place is to do the heavy lifting out of the gate, right? And
yeah,
that's why I think it's so important to really go to market with a crystal clear idea of not just who the best person might be, but who the right person is, right? Because, the best person based on some technical skills might not be the right person for your team.
right.
They might not be the right person because they've worked in, they've used those technical skills in a completely different context, right? So,
Hmm.
so that's why I like to run very detailed intake calls with all of my clients as soon as they tell me that they have a new requirement, they have a new opening on their team. I don't go to market until I've had a conversation with them to flesh out all those details and make sure that nobody's wasting their time in,
Right.
the early onset, because, you know, it becomes a vicious cycle of, back and forth. And, again, the time is valuable.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they don't come to me with resource needs until the fires are already hitting the ceiling,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. When they need them
yeah.
yesterday.
Exactly. Yeah, we hear that all the time.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah,
I'm doing that right now.
I bet. I
um,
bet.
so yeah, I want to kind of get into the patterns you've seen across industries when the right talent isn't brought in early enough. Um,
Okay.
because yeah, I mean, like you said, they're coming to you when the fire is already there. From your vantage point, I'm sure you see the same story on repeat. What are the early patterns that show up when a project starts slowing down because the wrong talent decisions weren't made at the start, and what can be done about it?
I mean, there's always an
Hmm.
opportunity cost associated with not finding the right resource early enough. But oftentimes, this is not an issue around talent mismatch. Rather it's a timeline issue or a commitment issue. And I think we've kind of touched on both of those
Yeah.
already, but just to kind of, bring it full circle in this moment. Again, this is why you need a trusted staffing partner to properly qualify resources, gauge the team fit, the commitment levels, evaluate the candidate's motivation for joining. And without that, you will either spend more time than you need going back and forth, with too many candidates that are not relevant, and spend way too much time looking at people who are not qualified, or we're not going to work out. They're the wrong people. They shouldn't have been introduced to you in the first place. And that is going to what? Then you're going to have to push back critical project milestones because, all because important context was missing in the
Yeah.
early stages. On the other side, rushing to hire someone who already has one foot out the door is another big issue, right? And I'd say even bigger issue. The latter of those is probably the greater of two evils here, because nobody can afford to waste their valuable time onboarding, training, passing on IP to someone only to have to do it all over again when that person doesn't work out. And again, the opportunity costs of not finding the right resource early enough can be negated by having those deep contextual discussions that really help clarify exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that gap that, we've been alluding to specifically, because I think most leaders understandably try to solve resource gaps internally at first. And I think, of course, leaders are trying to do the right thing here. They want to develop their people. They want to use internal talent. They maybe don't want to throw outsiders into the mix unless they have to. So when does solving it internally actually work? And when does it quietly set up the project to struggle? Like, when is the right time to work with a hiring partner?
That is a great question. Because of course, internal fulfillment is great if and when it's possible, because the importance of internal IP, office politics and cultural fits and just the way that organizations uniquely do things, right? It really can't be understated. And having that experience by working in the organization already is very valuable. But pulling someone internally from one part of your organization to another, it always leaves a gap, right? It leaves a gap on the team you pulled the resource from. And then really the question becomes, can you adequately and effectively organize to close that gap? As a hiring leader, can your team afford to share that resources capacity? And does that resource really have the bandwidth to be spread thinner across multiple initiatives if you're going to share them instead of just pulling them away? And really, you have to be real with yourself about, is there a bigger talent scarcity gap to address, right? And I think that really all comes down to, what is the broader organizational opportunity cost of taking someone away from one team to join another, or sharing them between multiple teams, and whether or not that shared resources approach can deliver full capacity given the project landscape, right? I mean, can your deliverables be met with, only someone working half the time on one thing and half the time on the other, right? And so, I work with a lot of enterprise organizations who cycle through contractors whose leaders and also their peers that work adjacently to them, that, in these high visibility organizations, very cross-functional project landscapes and deliverables, they cycle through contractors quite often, and a lot of the time they want to get these contractors who have previous work experience in that organization re-engaged, because they understand the benefit of minimizing the learning curve, not just on the technology side, but also on the organizational learning side, right? And again, this just comes back to highlight my point, which I keep coming back to, about trusted networks, right? And the foundation of which are built on positive experiences. And I'm going to throw a stat at you here. And one that I'm very, very proud of, Tonya. I have a 99% stick rate for my candidates working the full term of their contracts. And I think that speaks.
That's impressive.
Yeah, right? It is. It's something I'm very proud about. It's something that I bring up to all my clients, new and old. And I think it just speaks volumes about the positivity inherent in those experiences.
Yeah.
Experiences rather. So, you better believe I can get those folks re-engaged. I mean, I've
Yeah.
got great relationships. And again, the trusted networks are critical in these types of situations. But another important question to consider, I think when it comes to internal fulfillment versus external support
Hmm.
is, do you have the right resources internally to deliver the project at all? Right? Are
Right.
you venturing into uncharted territory, trying to cut corners by putting a square peg
Right.
in a round hole?
Yeah.
Right?
That's so
Whether,
true.
right? It is. A lot of people will look for the easiest solution, you know,
Yeah.
by just instead of going out to market and finding someone who's done that. Okay, maybe we go with someone who has a little bit of exposure to that, or who we think has the ability to do it. But those decisions can, like you said, compound over time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if that learning curve takes longer than you expected, or it turns out that those people don't have the skills that you imagined that they would, that's a huge opportunity cost, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is a cost. I
Yeah,
mean, there's a cost either way, but there's definitely a cost trying to build everything internally while the world moves faster than your internal learning curve potentially.
a-
Um,
absolutely.
IDC estimates tech talent shortages will cost organizations $5.5 trillion in
Wow.
2026, mostly from delays in the inability to compete. So, hiring internally with maybe not the most aligned talent for the project, that waiting is expensive.
And you know what else? That's not a positive experience for anyone, right?
Exactly.
Because that creates a lot of internal pressure, right? I mean, whether it's on the resource that was, had given these super impossible deliverables based on their skill set, or the expectations that leaders had for this person, because some hiring manager said, oh yeah, we'll bring on so and so and they can do it. It causes a lot of problems, more problems than solutions whenever the delays come in, right? Because who's on the chopping block at that point?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone
Well,
is.
and I think every IT leader's been there, right? There's a gap. They know
Absolutely.
it. They know bringing in help, it's going to take effort and time. So they stretch. We
Hmm.
hear it all the time. They stretch, they muscle through, they ask their team to do more. Everybody's pulling their hair out.
Yeah.
So, from what you've seen, because I'm sure you've seen a lot
Hmm.
with your clients, what's the difference between a team that tries to muscle through a skills gap and a team that brings in the right expertise at the right time? Do you have examples that you could share with your actual clients where that was like something that you had to save them from?
I mean, I, I'm sure I can think of a specific example,
Yeah.
but I think really that defining the type of skill gap
Hmm.
is everything when it comes to making a decision like this, right? And it all comes down to one thing, and that's your level of resistance or tolerance of the learning curve, right? What are you looking for? Do you need someone who can hit the ground running, who can be independent, maybe someone who can even like coach your team and again like lead them down the path of least resistance, right? Do you want someone to
Hmm.
take a lot of ownership on that deliverable? Or do you have a knowledgeable team already? Someone that's, a team that's very capable, right?
Hmm.
And maybe you prefer to bring on someone who's a little bit more malleable, someone who you're willing to invest in, and, who can learn from your team and grow with your team. And, this is why so many of my clients will be on one side of the fence or the other. We need an SME, someone who has been there, done that several times, because the flames are hitting the ceiling.
Yeah.
Or you know what? We're gonna scale our budget back a bit. We want someone who's a little bit more green, someone who can come in and is committed to the long term, the long term vision, who's going to be with our team for some time, learn and grow, and is looking for like a career branding opportunity. And I mean, I see going one direction or the other like every day. I mean, I could think
Hmm.
of a million examples of this, right?
Yeah.
It's just it really depends on your tolerance for the learning curve, or your resistance to it, right? That's
Right.
really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And what you have to do, I think, is look at your current state and the gap to the desired state, and then
Hmm.
decide, do you have time to bring on someone who's a little bit more green and malleable, or do
Yeah.
you need someone who's going to come in and take ownership and, lead you across the finish line?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so what I hear you saying is when you don't bring expertise, there's a delivery risk, right? And I think the smartest
Absolutely.
leaders don't wait until there's damage to admit they need help. I think strong IT leadership now is less about heroics and more about designing the right support system early, because once you're behind, we talked about that compounding effect that, you're compounding the cost, and it isn't just schedule, it's
Hmm.
trust and quality and burnout and, the negative experiences that you were talking about.
Absolutely. And in one instance, and just this specific role, like I've seen so many times with a project manager, who maybe a project manager has not lived up to the expectations
Mm-hmm.
of what they were brought on to do. And, I have an arsenal of very senior project managers that I reach out to for specific groups, whether it be in, my banking clients, my insurance clients, my retail clients, whatever the case may be. They have experience specifically in saving projects and bringing them out of the
Mm-hmm.
red and into the green. And those people are very expensive, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, had they had brought that person on initially, or maybe paid a little bit more attention to what the context of the project was and what those needs were, they wouldn't have taken the risk of hiring someone that wasn't proven yet, and wouldn't have to let that person go and bring in someone who, is very expensive to fix problems.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity cost, and that's a real cost.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So when an IT leader brings in a staffing partner, recruiting partner, outside help, what should they look
Mhm.
for in a partner who's actually going to reduce the friction instead of adding to it?
Well, I mean, that's what we're here to do, is reduce the
Yeah.
friction, right? Staffing
Yeah.
partners are meant to make hiring leaders' lives easier. We're here to cut through the noise, and we're here to take an active approach to solving your problems. And I want to highlight that active approach. And I think I mentioned it kind of at the beginning of our discussion. Why staffing agencies are different, compared to, maybe an internal HR team, right? If you're okay with a passive approach, and passive approach being like posting your job description and hoping the right person applies, you know what's going to happen is you're going to be spending the majority of your time filtering through hundreds of unqualified applicants, rather than, engaging a staffing firm who's going to go to market with that clear identity of who you're looking for and actively seek them out, whether they're looking or not. Because, like I said, the people who are typically applying to jobs are people who need jobs. And the people who might be the best resource for whatever your deliverable is,
Has a
whatever your
job.
project is, they have a job already because
Yeah.
they're great, right?
Right.
So you gotta have someone who is going to give you access to the passive market, who's going to go after people that aren't necessarily available and sell them the dream of coming to work for your organization and support your project. And, that all comes down to project context, understanding how to ask the right questions, leverage the right selling points, and knowing your organization and knowing your project and knowing your team and all those nuanced details that come into play, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so helpful. And I don't think I've ever heard it framed that way.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so what I'm hearing is, it's so much more than recruiting or staffing or posting a job or
mhm.
interviewing and placing.
Yeah. If you want agility, if you want quality control, and if you want access to the best
Right.
talent in the market, not just
Yeah.
the best available, the best period,
Right.
right? You know, those people aren't applying for roles. And
Right.
right, and that's why people work with me, right? We don't
Yeah.
headhunt. We don't. So that's what we do. Sorry, we do headhunt. We don't.
Right.
We don't spray and pray, right? We're
Right.
not posting job descriptions and hoping someone falls into our lap. We go after the people.
Yeah. I love that. So you're accessing that
Yeah,
that passive market and really filtering risk.
absolutely, 100%. Because what did I say at that one of the biggest issues in plaguing IT leaders today is transparency, right?
Yep.
Someone
Yep.
might look great on paper, but if you're just going to, bring them in for an interview, and even if you're not bringing them in for an interview, just do a screening call with someone who looks really good on paper, you're going to find out that they're not good. Why wouldn't you let me, you know, maybe I come across that person. Likely I won't because I'm not going to market. But if their resume is, propped up well enough, maybe I will come across
Yeah.
them. But I'll be able to flesh out if they're, if they're legit or if they aren't
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
quickly, right?
No, this is good stuff. So I want to zoom out a little bit because the way
Yeah.
IT teams build talent is changing. I mean, gosh, even internally, we had a hiring plan that we put together in December, and because of what AI can do, it's just changing so fast.
Mhm.
The way teams build talent is changing, will likely continue to change. And, I don't think it looks as things traditionally looked in the past, right? It's not full-time headcount anymore. And it's always a mix now. I mean, there's, remote contractors, we've got contractors, consultants, fractional specialists, niche experts, um, full-time, part-not time. How should IT leaders be thinking about the right mix of internal and external skills going forward?
Everybody is going to have their own preference on what percentage of their team is their full-time skeleton team,
Mhm.
what percentage of their team are contractors that they use to scale up, scale down, or bring in, special skill sets, right? So a matrix approach to staffing is imperative in today's world, today's landscape of projects that
Yeah.
have all of these niche technologies involved and have these crazy deliverable timelines. Nothing's ever fast enough, right?
Yeah.
You got to be moving. You got to be moving faster than your competitors. You're going to get left behind, right? And the reason a matrix approach is so important is because your skeleton team will always have some limitations, right? Whether it's capacity related or whether it's capability related.
Mhm.
The latter is especially applicable when venturing into uncharted territory, as I was mentioning before, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking to introduce new technology, if you're looking to integrate with a new vendor product that's maybe the people on your internal team aren't familiar with, right? You know, consulting firms and implementation partners, right? They are branded as specialists in a lot of
Mhm.
these types of project delivery scenarios, right? But they have a bench of internal resources that are specialized in, that specific
Right.
niche. They have limitations as well. They can only deploy the best available resources on their bench. And as I've said before, the best person that's available might not be the best person for the role. So a lot of these big consulting firms, they might have the most relevant talent already deployed at another client, and they're just giving you, you know, whoever's available, the next best person available, right? And
Yeah.
you don't want to have the second tier, right? I
Right.
think
Right.
you'll always need a mechanism in place to access the open market because the people who have those niche skills know they have those niche skills and they know they're going to make more money contracting than they will by working for a big consulting firm
Right.
or going to work full time somewhere. And also bringing those types of folks in for, let's say it's a year-long initiative, right? They stack up, you know, three or four of those back to back. All of a sudden, they look like a rock star in the industry. So the best people, in my opinion, for a lot of those niche technologies, never find a permanent home. They like to move from one project to the next
Yeah.
because it helps with their personal branding,
Mhm.
and it helps, with their earning potential, right? And
Yeah.
and my talent networks are full of those people. They're serial contractors that spend a year or two at one organization. They leverage all of that experience that they gain at these top tier enterprise organizations, and when another one inevitably follows,
Mhm.
looking to adopt that technology to compete with, this is big across the big banks. We work with a lot of them, right? I mean, and they
Yeah.
they all try to follow each other. So in that industry specifically, the contractors will hop from one to the other because those skills are so in demand, but they're just in demand at different times, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's why you need access to the open market. And
Yeah.
um
Yeah, no, it
that's
makes
what that's
sense.
what my networks are built of.
Yes, makes complete sense, right? Like I think the old model was hire permanent teams and hope they can adapt to everything. We don't live in that world anymore. And the
No.
new model is, and this is what I hear you saying, keep your core strong
Hmm.
and then bring in expertise intentionally when the terrain changes. And we are in
Absolutely.
an era where that terrain is constantly shifting.
Couldn't agree with you more, Tanya. No, that's exactly what I'm saying. You
Yeah.
got it. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm seeing. It's the new way of working, right?
Yeah, so it's strategic design, and it's
Mhm.
getting me to think about staffing differently. It's more strategic design and keeping a strong skeleton team that holds the business and the institutional knowledge and the culture
Mhm.
carriers, and then bring in outside expertise to accelerate outcomes, especially when there's new tech, infrastructure, new
And you know what
demands, new delivery timelines.
and one of the benefits to someone like you, for example, in bringing on those expert resources internally, there's a lot of knowledge transfer, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
what used to be foreign concepts and foreign technology to your skeleton team, become a lot more familiar. And there's a lot of value in not just the immediate deliverable by bringing in an expert resource like that, but the long-term vision. Because like I said, these people are not coming in for a long-term goal. They're coming in to put their head down and help you meet your deliverable. But just collaboration within that environment with your existing skeleton team, there's going to be knowledge transfer, and that's
Yeah.
that's benefit to your skeleton team, and
Yeah, 100%.
in the long run, definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, our team talks to IT leaders every day, and
Hmm.
we are hearing they're stretched thin. Their teams are stretched thin. They're largely under resourced, and yet they keep pushing through because I guess it feels like that's what leadership is just to continue to push through. That's what we hear over and over. So for the IT leader listening right now, what's the moment they should stop pushing their team further and bring in outside expertise instead? Like what are the three triggers leaders can look for? Like practical signals that say stop stretching, bring help.
I'm sure we've gone over these before, but if I can bring it home, I
Mm-hmm.
think once you recognize that your existing team doesn't have the capacity, doesn't have this, the capacity or the bandwidth, or doesn't have the skills
Yeah.
that you need, you also realize at that point, or at least you should, a light bulb should go off, that the path of least resistance in terms of meeting your deliverables, it resides solely in external support, because
Yeah.
that external support can empower you. It can bridge knowledge gaps. As I was saying, it can transfer critical skills.
Yeah.
It can make your entire team better in the process. And all you have to do, and it's not just about bringing someone in externally to get the job done, and paying whatever that resource costs.
Right.
There's so many tangible benefits beyond that I was just explaining before.
No, this is helpful. So what I
Yeah,
hear you saying is external expertise shouldn't be treated like a last resort. It's a strategic lever, right? And
absolutely.
so, and I think the trap is that leaders confuse endurance, like
Mhm.
being able to just push through, confusing endurance with leadership, because real leadership is clarity, right? It's knowing when the cost of pushing is higher than the cost of getting support. And
Very
so what
well
I hear
put.
you saying is like it in so many ways beyond recruiting and staffing, it is a strategic lever in so many ways that it reduces risk, it compresses timeline, it protects the team. You get that knowledge transfer that you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are willing to come to terms with that, and exactly what you said, real leadership is not necessarily muscling through. It's understanding how to tackle problems efficiently and effectively and
Yeah.
improve your current state and your existing team. If you show me the path where there's, you know, a gap, I'll help you find the people that have walked it, right? And
Right.
those are the people that are going to add a lot of value to your team. And of course, you know, there's an expense associated with that, but there's an opportunity cost with not doing it. So you have to
Yeah.
decide at what point does the opportunity cost outweigh the actual cost of, leveling up.
Yeah. Perfect. Clayton, this was so good. And
Tonya, I agree. Thank you. It's been a
yeah,
pleasure.
I mean, this is not a subject that we've covered, and yet it's something that my team hears day in and day out. So I'm so glad that you were able to share this wealth of information. And, I really hope that our audience starts to think about staffing a little differently, because they don't have to push through. There are resources so they don't have to push through the pain and endure. And I think the real takeaway here is simple. Like, IT projects don't stall because the strategy is bad. They stall because talent decisions underneath them don't hold. And, what we're seeing is IT leaders are stretched so thin, and their tendency is just to push harder. But to protect delivery, it really is about finding the right expertise.
Absolutely. And because they're so busy with these projects, I know they don't have the bandwidth. And that's why people like myself exist.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're here to help you navigate those niche talent markets when you don't have maybe the familiarity with the nicheness of it, the technology involved, or you just don't have the bandwidth because you're so busy with managing your team and trying to meet your deliverables.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're navigating a major initiative right now, or you've got a project on the calendar and just can't afford that drift or stalling, I wanted to make this easy for you. So go to technologymatch.com, and there you can search. You could just type in the word staffing, and Clayton and Limitless Staffing will pop up for you. It should be at the top of the result. I'll link to those pages in the show notes. I will link Clay's LinkedIn profile in the show notes too. Anything else that we should link for the audience?
No, I think that's great. My LinkedIn profile, you can put my email address in there.
Okay.
I think that's typical, kind of first step in the process of engagement, right? Perfect.
Thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. And I know I can think of a few people in our audience that I'm going to send it to specifically because they're
Perfect.
battling with this right now.
I look forward to meeting them. Tonya, thank you so much for having me. It's been an incredible discussion. I love shining light on this industry. And like I said, it's people helping people, and I can't wait to continue doing it.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.